So, what books have I actually been reading? I know. I run a channel that is all about books, and somehow I spend more time talking around books and publishing and all of this stuff. And to be honest, half the time making videos, I feel like I'm standing in a field looking mildly confused. The usual. But I've actually been reading quite a lot recently, and rather than trying to talk about everything I've read, I think it would take a week. I'm just going to pick out a few highlights, the books, the manga that really stuck with me. So let's start with a weird one. I'm Darth James. Hi, you know what to do. Recently, I finished the seventh volume of Destroy Humans They Can't Be Regenerated. And every time I talk about this manga, I feel the need to explain what it is because it sounds like a forgotten PlayStation game that somehow escaped containment. At its heart, it's a manga about teenagers playing Magic the Gathering in the late 90s, which means basically it's nostalgia weaponized. Card shops, tournament scene, trading cards with friends, obsession over cardboard, weird, awkward teenage moments, and those moments you think back on and just cringe when we thought we knew everything. You know, that weird awkwardness? Trying desperately to look cooler than we actually were. It's fantastic. The thing I love the most is it feels like an obnoxious mirror of of your teenage self. Well, my teenage self. Every now and then a character says something and I physically cringe because I remember being exactly that person. Not kind of like that person, exactly that person. This manga understands what it's like to be a teenager whose entire personality is based around being awkward. And hobbies. You don't just enjoy the hobby, you become the hobby. Your social life, your identity, your dreams are the hobby. Your future plans somehow involve the hobby. And looking back on that now, it's both incredibly funny and slightly horrifying. Mostly funny, slightly horrifying. On the subject of manga, I've been rereading the Pokemon Adventures manga. I've gone through Red, Blue, Yellow, Gold, Silver, and Crystal Arc so far. Now, before anyone starts clicking away, yes, I know, this is probably not the most exciting thing for a lot of people. I get it. Not everyone wants to hear a grown man talk about Pokemon manga with the enthusiasm of someone discovering fire. But I'm going to be doing a deep dive video on it anyway because I love them and the 30th anniversary. And one of the things I've been trying to do recently is revisit the things I genuinely enjoy rather than constantly worrying about what's the right thing to talk about. And Pokemon Adventures is and was a huge part of my life growing up, and going back to it has been fun. A lot of it holds up incredibly well. Some parts are very much products of their time, and some parts are just wonderfully strange. I also want to revisit other manga series I love. Yu-Gi-Oh! Is definitely on the list. At some point, I'd love to go back through the entire series, the original ones, because there's a lot more going on than people remember, and maybe Sailor Moon too, who knows. The older I get, the more interested I've become in revisiting things rather than constantly chasing whatever comes out 5 minutes ago. Sometimes it's nice to go back and see something you loved 20 years ago still connects with you. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't, and that's interesting too. Speaking of revisiting things, I decided to reread The Secret History by Donna Tartt, but not in English, I'm reading it in Hebrew. Now, that has been a really interesting experience. It's one of my favourite novels, so I know the story well enough that I'm not struggling to follow what happens, especially when you're reading things that have been translated. What I found interesting, though, is seeing how certain ideas, phrases, and conversations translate. You start noticing little differences, you start noticing choices the translator made, certain passages feeling slightly different, for better or worse. Just different. It's like walking through a house you lived in for years and suddenly noticing all the furniture has been moved 2 inches to the left. The shape is the same, the feeling is slightly different. If that's something people are interested in hearing more about, let me know, because I'd genuinely love to make a video about more videos about reading books in another language. Perks of being multilingual. But it's been a really rewarding experience. Now, the next book, and we're not talking about the next book, I'm not naming it. I'm not naming the author, I'm not naming the series. I'm simply going to say 2 words. Orc City. That's it. Those of you know, know. Those of you who don't know can have fun trying to figure out what I'm talking about. I'm choosing peace today. I'm choosing diplomacy. I'm choosing not to start arguments in my comment section. Moving on. Orc City for the win. I'm Team Elf though. I also reread The Diary of a Young Girl by Anne Frank, and I've talked about this before in my Exploring series, and I don't really have some clever observations to talk about when talking about this book. Sometimes a book reaches a point where analysing it feels secondary, or completely unimportant. Every time I read it, I'm reminded that behind all the history, behind all the documents, behind all the discussions, there was a real person. A young woman writing about her life, her hopes, her frustrations, her family, the ordinary things people think about when they're living through extraordinary circumstances. It's one of those books that always affects me, not because it's trying to. It simply tells the truth about a life that was lived. And that's powerful enough on its own. Then there's Dune. Because apparently every few years I look at a 600-page science fiction novel and think, you know what, I'm going to do this again. I've lost count of how many times I've read this book at this point. Frank Herbert's Dune, I have probably read way too many times in my life. And somehow every single reread gives me something new. I notice different themes, different conversations, different character moments, different ideas about power, religion, leadership, ecology, myth. It's one of those books, actually the whole series in general actually, but it's one of those books where your relationship changes with it as you get older. The book stays the same, you don't. So every reread becomes a slightly different experience. I still think it's one of the most important science fiction novels ever written. It's not because it's perfect, no book is, but because you can see the fingerprints of it absolutely everywhere. Every generation of science fiction book that came after it has borrowed from it again, reacted against it, has been inspired by it. Whether people realise it or not, it's basically osmosis at this point. So many science fiction novels published today exist in conversation with Dune. And honestly, I suspect I'll be rereading it when I'm 80 years old and complaining about my knees. No, I already do that. So that's a small snapshot of what I've been reading recently. Not everything, not even close. You don't need the university textbooks. Just some of the books and mangas that stuck in my head. And honestly, it's what I tend to remember. Not every book I read stays in my brain, just the ones that linger, the ones that make me think about it weeks later, months later, sometimes years later. And as always, let me know what you've been reading. And if you're one of the 5 people on Earth who get excited about when I start talking about Pokemon Adventures, congratulations. This is apparently your year. There'll be more coming. Probably more Yu-Gi-Oh! As well, maybe Sailor Moon, maybe something completely unexpected. At some point, I've learnt not to predict what this channel is going to become, because every time I do it, it immediately proves me wrong anyway. Which is honestly probably for the best. So, I'm Darth James. Like, sub, tell me what you think, leave comments, hype this video, and if you want to get involved in the conversation more, check out my Patreon, my channel memberships. Check out Substack for written articles. Talk to you guys soon. Bye.